Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to the show this Thursday, the 8th of June, 2021. Glad to have you guys here. Now, okay, we're going to get started right away right now. We're going to open up charts right here. We're going to take a look at this chart. This is bonds. Now, under Paul Volcker, but way back in the 1970s and 80s, they raised the interest rate up to almost 20%. And you can see it, that's this spike up. But if you guys are into charting analysis, if you look at enough charts after a while, it becomes second nature to you. And this chart should be second nature, but I'm going to explain it to you guys. We've seen this fall off in yields on bonds. It's lasted for 40 years, going all the way back to 1980. Just look at it, descending. But in that descent, it's like a saw blade, it goes up and then it comes down again. But each time the lower low is lower than the previous low. So it's a descending chart. And for 40 years it's been descending. But what do we see right there on the tip on the end where it says 2020? We see a little pop. Well, in other words, a little saw blade going up. But if we look at the whole length of that for 40 years, once the saw blade hits a certain height of each of the tooth in the saw blade, tends to go back down again. So, looking at this chart, what direction do you think bond yields are going to go in? I know I hear out there all the time that inflation's running away, yields are going to rise, but they've already risen. We're at the top of the tooth on the blade right now. And if you take into consideration that now at this point, because of the outstanding debt, because of the amount that the American government owes, and not just in the debt you see, but also in all of the unfunded liabilities, which direction do you actually think this is going to go in? Do you think we're going to see it pop up like it did in the 1980s? I don't think so. I think the direction it's going to move in is the bond yields are going to stay suppressed because the Fed doesn't have the ammunition. This is where the Fed's lacking ammunition. They cannot raise yields. They cannot allow bond yields to go too high. It would wreck the financial system at this point, completely and utterly smash it to pieces. Wouldn't be anything left of it. Now, take a look at your community you live in. Go down each house, Say the house next door to you, maybe a nurse works there. Well, lives there, but what does she do? She works at the hospital. She's still a consumer because she doesn't actually produce anything. She goes in and she helps the sick, which is a noble thing to do, but maybe she opens up a bandage, That bandage was produced someplace. Now it can't be used again. It's over. It's been consumed, right? Everything that the people do. Maybe they go to the next door next to her. On the opposite side of her, maybe it's an old fella. Maybe he's living on Social Security. He's not producing anything either. He goes to the next house. And what are you actually searching for? You're searching for finally you hit a house where somebody actually produces something. You'd probably have to go down 200 homes before you finally find a young man that works on a farm. He actually makes something that we consume. We're all consumers here in North America. We suck up everything. That's a lot of things now are made in China, and they're producing them. They're the producer. We're the consumer. But right now, it's gotten even much worse since COVID, has come along. Now almost every household is either collecting a paycheck from the government or everybody's consuming. And you have to have somebody produce things. Otherwise, if everybody's just consuming, the guys that's producing is going to sit there and going to say to themselves, gee, I'm the only guy that's making anything there. And everybody else is using what I'm producing. And where are they getting the money to pay for it? Well, they're just printing it off of a high-speed printer. I got to charge more. you just can't keep this going. We're in a state of collapse. The price of everything's got to continue to go up and up and up because there's so few people actually producing things, and there's so many consuming things. You know, they had a problem like this, on Easter Island. People that lived on Easter Island, the ocean around them was like we view when we look off into space and we see the stars. They looked at the ocean around them, and they viewed their world as Easter Island. That was their whole world. There was nobody else out there. The ocean was like the sky. It was like, but there's a lot of people that lived there. The population swelled. And they were chopping down the trees. The farmers were the only ones that were actually producing anything. They were chopping down the trees, they were planting farms, and they were producing food for all these people. Then they ran into a crisis like we're headed toward. The population, over a period of time then, kept decreasing. Wars broke out. They were fighting over food and everything else. And in the end, from what was a population of probably a large-sized city on these islands, went right down to the only people that were left were sitting around a picnic table. They finally come to a agreement that, hey, we got to survive here. We'll all work together instead of fighting with one another in the end, And so the population things started to settle back down again. But they went through tremendous hardships during that period of time when nobody was producing anything. The only ones that were producing anything was the farmers, and the people were hungry, so they'd raid the farmers. We're in a similar situation here where everybody you see is a consumer. But not only that, we've switched over to all this credit-based system where we're creating all this money from nothing that maybe you could call it fugazi. And we're expanding credit. In other words, we're expanding debt. We're headed toward an amazingly powerful crisis. And it's not far out into our future. Because once the inflation monster really gets out of the bottle, it's awful hard to put him back in. Paul Volcker had an awful hard time. He had to raise interest rates up like 3 times. Didn't work the first time. I think he raised them up to like 10% or whatever, and didn't work. And so they did it again and again. Finally, they put the interest rate up to, like you see it on the chart here. Let me move the chart just a little bit so you can see it. It was massively high. We're looking at, it was massively high interest rates they had to put them up to before finally they crushed inflation. It took a lot, guys. Well, we're faced with that situation again, but this time they're not going to be able to stop it because they can't raise interest rates up like that anymore to stop it. But once it actually gets going, it's kind of a self-feeding cycle because this money is only held together. The US dollar and everything else is only held together with confidence. And confidence is starting to be lost right now. I figure you got about a year left to prepare for not just regular inflation, but hyperinflation, where prices are going up daily instead of hourly even on almost everything, because there's going to be a short supply of almost everything because we don't produce anything anymore. We're all consumers. It just doesn't work that way. Let's take a look at what's going on with the markets today. Live price for gold. This is the only fundamental thing behind the world's whole financial system. What do? They try to smack down on this morning. And they're pretty successful. $8.70 down. $18.91 right now. Where's silver? Silver, our friend. $27.61. It's down 27 cents on the day so far. Boy, these prices are going to explode once it happens. Can't tell you exactly when they're going to lose control of this, but I think silver's going to be what breaks it. When they're finally going to lose control. And, oh my goodness, the upside. Whereas things like the stock market and stuff, there's nothing but air underneath them. This has rock-solid fundamentals underneath it. Each and every ounce of silver, if you buy a physical ounce of silver, took a lot of work, took a lot of energy, took blood, sweat, tears to get it into that physical ounce. You know? And so, this is the most undervalued asset on planet Earth right now, at $27.61. Let's take a look now at cryptocurrencies, and we're looking at the price at 1430 billion. We're looking at a Bitcoin price of 32,140. Been a lot of shorting in this market lately, you know, and the shorts are running an awful dangerous game, especially if they're naked shorts. Running an awful dangerous game because this cryptocurrency market, you know, is they've been trying to push it under 30,000. It doesn't want to go under 30,000. And these conditions that we have right now out there with a failing financial system, and this is one of the asset classes that are out of the dollar, is cryptocurrencies. All three, gold, silver, cryptos, could all become priceless, basically, when your money has been corrupted. You know, I mean, if you got a flat tire on the side of the highway, you will use that sissy. I call them sissy spares. Those little spares that don't have, you know, you're only supposed to drive slow on them. You will use that sissy spare if you have nothing else to use. This is the way with a hyperinflation. You got nothing else to use. You reach out to anything as a means of exchange, as a means of storing your value away. You know, as far as barter is concerned, I hear in New York City they've used Tide laundry detergent as a means of exchange or barter. You know, anything can become money, especially if it's something that takes work or has a cost associated with producing it, and is limited in quantity. All those things don't relate to the U.S. dollar. I mean, now it's digital. I mean, they can just walk over to a computer screen and push in 1 trillion and push a button and bang, it's existing. Nothing associated with creating that. So its intrinsic value is 0, and it's going to go to 0 ultimately in the end. So now let's take a look now at the Dow Jones today. You know, it's down 1 point. But it was down a lot more earlier, 34,629. We're going to take a look at oil, 69.76. Can you get closer to 70 bucks? It's up 53 cents on the day. The MOVE index, slowly descending, 49.55. Let's take a look at bonds. Now we see these yields dropping. And, you know, that U.S. 10-year is getting only at 1.53 now. Yeah, they're going to keep them low. I don't see, if they did decide to tighten and do they would probably try to raise the overnight rate by 25 basis points. And it would probably crash the system. Just trying to move 1/4 or 1% would probably crash the system if the Fed tried to raise interest rates. That's how stuck we are. You know, when I lived down in Florida, you know, sand is completely different than mud and everything. You know, like people that live maybe up in the north, maybe up in around Atlanta and stuff. You know, they have red clay. You know. And when it gets dry, when it's wet out, the clay gets muddy. And you'll get stuck, you know. But when it's dry out, then the clay gets very hard. It's like driving on asphalt. It's nice and hard, you know. But where I grew up down in Florida, all they got is sand. Powdery white sand everywhere. Okay? And when it gets dry, it's totally different. When it's wet, it gets hard. Sand gets hard when it's wet, you know. And when sand gets dry, it gets soft and you get stuck in it. So in the winter times down there in Florida, you used to get dry spells, you know. And the road that was normally hard all year, you know, because the sand was wet, would dry out and get powdery, you know, and you used to get your vehicle stuck in that. Oh my goodness, I'm telling you, it was some awful time sometimes. I had my car stuck in it 3-4 times, you know, in the powdery sand. It's can be an awful job getting your sand. It's like being stuck in quicksand, having a car stuck in that dry, powdery, hot sand. The trick to getting out of it, the trick when you see a big patch of dry, powdery sand down there in Florida on one of those back roads, what you do is you speed your car up and you kind of float your car across it with the momentum. If you try to go across it slow, you get stuck in it every time. And I mean, it's the worst stuff to get stuck in. You'll sink to China. Anyway, look at these bond yields. They are stuck. It's like they're stuck in dry, powdery sand, you know? And they can't let them go up. And looking at that chart originally I showed you guys to begin with, you can see they're going down, they're getting stuck, and they're mired in that mud. And I don't see these rates going up significantly. So what's going to stop the inflation? Because the inflation's starting to get out of control. It's not transient. And if you can't get these bond yields unstuck from being low, well, it's just going to continue. Bar the door. And once people start to lose confidence in the purchasing power, isn't that the thing that causes hyperinflation? People start to lose confidence. Well, that's next. That's going to come in the next 6 months. People are going to start to say, hey, you know, if I buy that, listen, Bertha, listen. If I buy that car this year, I know by next year it'll be worth as much used as it is this year buying it new. And I'll get to drive it for a whole year and it'll be worth more, maybe, next year used. And he's right. That's what's going to happen. So everybody will start spending their money as fast as they get it, or they'll haul their money out of the bank and they're just going to say, I'm not going to save this money in here. I'm losing 20, 30, 40% a year keeping my money in the bank. You know how much is in savings in the United States of America? I think it's 20 trillion. There's 20 trillion more to spend. Well, there's consumer goods are only, like I say, are only being produced by certain people that are working to produce things. It's just simple. Prices are going to go up. Except for silver and gold, they'll be cheaper. In the end, that'll be the cheapest thing out there. It'll be the best thing to pave your driveway with is silver coins. If everything else keeps going up, 100% per month in the end. And if silver, well, that's just obvious. They're not going to be able to control it. It's basically it's going to break free. It's got a long way to go. It's going to snap to the upside when it finally breaks free. You know, this silver, the Basel III thing could be what breaks gold and silver free. And that's not even to the end of this month. It's just the days. I'm counting the days until that happens now at this point. We'll catch you guys in the next show, and you guys have a great day. Bye-bye, guys.